Hello, friends. Podcasting, section 3.3 of your AP statistics book. Wrapping up, we're going to have a test and a few classes, and so these are the last of the ideas. Uh, we're going to talk a little bit more about correlation. At this point, you should understand pretty well what correlation and regression are. We have not talked a lot about outliers other than to identify them or influential points, and there's a difference between these two, which we're going to hit, which you should get out. Um, We're not going to worry about lurking variables because they are not on the AP exam. You're only going to have to worry about confounding variables, which again are things you could reasonably have thought of in an experiment. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this idea that association does not necessarily imply cause and effect or causation. I want to reiterate at this point the importance of knowing the vocabulary, of understanding what the words mean, and then more importantly, using them correctly in your answers. So I want to start focusing more on writing good, legible English sentences in preparation for the AP exam in May. And then a few more ideas about correlation. So basically, we're going to wrap up correlation, things to be careful about in correlation, and talk about outliers and influential points. All right, folks, these three cautions appear in your book on page 233, 234, and things that we've already mentioned, but that I want to reiterate. Uh, Correlation and regression, at least what we do in this class, only describes linear relationships. So in the next chapter, we're going to talk a little bit about how to straighten curve data, but for the most part, all you've got to concern yourself with is how to execute and articulate linear relationships between two variable or bivariate data. Extrapolation, going to have a test. I just finished making your test. You're going to have test question or two on extrapolation. And if you think back to the manatee problem where, the y-intercept did not make sense, and that's because the y-intercept is outside of the data points that we had collected. So extrapolation, again, using a model outside the range of data that we have often produces unreliable predictions. And correlation is not resistant at this point. I hope that we have uh, really beaten this point home. Correlation, like mean and standard deviation, is not resistant. That means outliers are going to mess it up and make your model, your mathematical model, weak. Now I'm reminding you that I told you to look at as many of these graphs as possible and read the explanation. So this again is another one from your book. It gives you the numerical summaries right here. And again, you should be able to take those numbers and write this line using just the formulas that are in your packet. Again, you'll have those formulas at the AP exam. You just got to know how to use them. And then read these interpretations. Okay, so here's an actual graph, age at first word, and the adaptive score. And then this is a residual. Read these explanations. And the more of them you can read, and also look in your AP exam prep book for more. Okay, the more of them you read and think about, remember, you remember what you think about. So you got to think about this stuff, um, and how to interpret regular graphs in terms of form, strength, and direction, and then residual plots as well. Let me quickly draw this distinction for you. An outlier is any point that doesn't fit with the overall pattern in a scatter plot, but it's only an influential point if it significantly changes the calculation. In other words, if it can significantly changes your mathematical model. So again, you've got some stuff, some pictures in the book to read and interpret uh, how to explain whether something is or is not an influential point. All right, we're going to do some practice problems in class. And I think if you have these terms down, okay, read them, look at the examples, think about them. That's what you have to do. Just take 15, 20 minutes, half an hour, read, think, read, think. I want to remind you that you can skip the stuff on looking variables because they are not on the AP exam. And this last point I didn't get to, but I'm not going to make a whole nother podcast. So read this in your book on page 242 in your book. There's also another caution on page 243 in the middle of the problems, but we'll hit that tomorrow in class. Have a good night.